Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here, for staying here, and for deciding to come to my session instead of all the flashy client add-in stuff that is going to be showed in the room next door. So what are we going to do? We're going to talk about tools and tricks that make NAV development easier and more organized. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to show you just a whole bunch of tools. The idea is more that with the information I give you, you can decide whether to make your own tool or buy a tool, but to know about the possibilities in the product that you can use to do it. So the things that I'm going to show are not a tool that you can download, it's just an example. So we're going to talk about development in Dynamics NAV, defining what is development in Dynamics NAV, and then we're going to talk about organizing development. We're going to talk about object and version management. We're going to talk about the difference between a version of an object and a version of a set of objects. And then I also have some real-life tips for easy development, things that to use the CL editor different, and just some backdoors in the product that you might know or might not know. And then I hope that there is some time for Q&A. So let's look at development in Dynamics NAV. If you look at development in Dynamics NAV, then the definition of development can be different for who is developing. There is a different category of companies who is developing in the product, which of course starts at Microsoft, who is giving us the W1 database, which we can build our add-ons on top of. And they localize the database so we can start implementing. ISVs use NAV development to make their horizontal and vertical solutions. Partners on top of that will customize the system for end users. They will also be merging multiple ISV solutions into one database. And sometimes it's necessary to also merge localizations, even though that's not a best practice. Sometimes the customer himself does customizations. A customer, especially in the year 2011 and the years to come, has a big opportunity and a big request of integrating the product. So a customer typically starts to integrate a Dynamics NAV with its other applications. If you look at larger companies, they might be building kernel solutions that they roll out in different countries or in different departments. And customers also have a big requirement for reporting solutions and BI. So everyone in this list is developing in Dynamics NAV, but every company has generic requirements and specific requirements when it comes to development. Managing development is different for each project. If you develop something which is called a W1 database, it's completely different to manage than if you manage a project that is integrating Dynamics NAV with third-party solutions. But in general, we can say that the more functionality you get in the product, the more difficult it is to guarantee the quality. And one of the core challenges of development is managing objects. We talked about the four different types of companies who are developing in Dynamics NAV. And this is an old number, but Microsoft delivers a W1 database which is used in 70,000 installations. If you're an ISV, you might have 5,000 installations. I think if you have that, you're very proud. A partner can have 200 customers, and a customer has only one database. But the testing effort for all of these systems is the same. Microsoft should test his W1 database, the ISV is testing his ISV solution, the partner is testing the customizations, and if a customer changes something, he needs to test it as well. Except the smaller your number of installations get, the lesser like it's going to be to find a bug. Dynamics NAV can be set up in 1,000 ways with all kinds of parameters, and there's customizations on top of that. And the more installations you have, the more likely it's you are finding a bug. For example, if you have a customer installation and you develop something, and the customer switches on a setup field, all of a sudden something that always worked will crash. A common example is the credit limit check on the customer. If that is switched off, you can develop something in a part of Dynamics NAV, and it works, but then all of a sudden they start to say, well, we need to enable credit limit, and then you get this form.run model error that you're not allowed to do that during a transaction. And the development lifecycle is very short at a customer. You can go to a customer in the morning and say, well, I want to have this changed, and say, well, I thought we were going to do something else. Yeah, but you know, the accountant came in, and this is suddenly very important. While at Microsoft, they start with this long list of requirements. They start interviewing partners, and the development life cycle of a new release at Microsoft is much longer. So if you look at organizing development, and if you look at the requirements that you have to organize development, it really differs a lot, whether you work at Microsoft or at a customer or the ISV. Even a big and a small partner can have different requirements of managing development. So the more users you have on your system, the more chance you have of finding bugs. But using standard software will definitely increase the quality and decrease the chance of using bugs, or finding bugs. If you reuse something that is used at 10,000 other installations, the chance of you finding a bug in that piece of software is much smaller. And standard software also increases the development life cycle and reduces flexibility, because if you buy something at an ISV and you want to change it, of course, most of the time you can go in and change it yourself. But of course, the correct way is to go to that ISV and discuss the problem with him and see if they can make the change in the next release. But of course, that's not as flexible as we are used to, right? So go to a customer and change it and then shake hands and go away. But again, if you do development in Dynamics NAV, the core of doing the development is always about changing the objects. Whether you're at Microsoft, an ISV, a customer, the essential core part of doing development is at the end you start changing objects. Of course, development is not just changing objects. So I hope that many of you went to our previous session about partner-ready software, which is evangelism about what else is there about application development, and that's also about structuring your code. But today we're going to spend a lot of time on object management. So now that we have defined development in Dynamics NAV, the next challenge is to start organizing that development. So organizing is rearranging elements to follow one or more rules. And what is very important in this case is you should organize in a way that fits with the project. And as a customer, as a partner, as an ISV, you can have many different kinds of projects. and not every project requires the same methodology. If you develop something from scratch and you know you're going to a 3-year release cycle, you might have a completely different set of organizing requirements than if you develop a new report or you develop an interface. So always try to organize that matches with the project, and organization may never be a goal. A project doesn't go wrong because it's not organized the way it should or could. So if you look at the different levels of organization you have, there's organizing your company, whether you're Microsoft or ISV or an end user. There's some organization in your company which is also critical to the success of how you develop and how successful using the software can be. Then you have teams. You can have development teams, you can have functional teams, you can have marketing teams that needs to be organized. When those teams do projects need organization. In the end, it comes down to a task. So I say, and the task is, well, make this change. Can be a big change, can be a small change. And in the end, we are changing the objects, which is the core essence of development. In the session, we're mainly going to focus about project, task, and object. But let's say something about companies. My experience in general is that the bigger the company, the more difficult it is to organize. If you have a Navision partner which is in multiple countries with multiple developers, and developers get moved around, you hire freelancers. It's much more difficult to organize that than when you work at a small company with a limited set of developers, or even if you're at an end user and you do the development yourself. Then organizing and defining a set of rules is different. Adopting industry standards is easier than reinventing the wheel. And even though a reinvented wheel might look better, it might not fit the car. So don't try to reinvent the wheel. There is so much already done and said when it comes to doing this. And the company these days is less likely to work alone. When Dynamics NAV started, we had Navision Solution Centers, which worked regional, and if you were lucky, you run into each other at events. But the ecosystem is requiring us to work much closer together. So the chance of you working on others' code, on ISV code, on code that has been developed 10 years ago by a guy who left, is much bigger than it was 10 years ago when companies were traditionally more closed and inventing their own solutions. The success of a team depends on a willingness to learn and share from each other. I think it's, at least it's my experience that in IT and in development, we kind of like to do it our own way, and I think if you're open to a discussion and if you're open to arguments with others, I think that is really often the first big step into organizing your team and work together. Sometimes organizing development fails because even team members want to organize, but their leaders refuse to work, or they have their own mindset or thing. And another thing that happens quite a lot, and we also discussed it in the PRS session, is that sort out challenges between sales and development. If marketing makes a brochure and there's something in the brochure that is just not in your application, then there's definitely something wrong in organizing your company and your team. And vice versa is the same. If you have a great functionality but they have difficulties selling it, then one of the first challenges you might want to solve is to work together with the functional guys and the marketing guys, and make the quality of the product a shared responsibility. So don't start finger pointing. But let's go back to project management and tasks and objects. If you do a project, it's really important to choose a methodology that fits your project. And there are very many different methodologies to follow. And I don't want to deep dive into methodologies. If you go on the internet, there's a lot of information to find about methodologies. There's books you can buy, and books will contradict to each other. But for example, a very classical way of developing is the waterfall approach. In Dynamics NAV, prototyping is really done a lot. And for myself, I really like to do it agile, if the project allows to do it. So let's have a quick look at some of the possibilities. If you look at the waterfall approach, the waterfall approach basically starts with gathering requirements and writing down stuff you want to have done. And then when you have the requirements done, you start in a design phase. And traditionally in a waterfall, there's no really a point where you start looking back. And if you're at the top, there is less interaction with what happens at the end. This is a very traditional approach. And maybe some projects still require doing it the waterfall approach. If you have a very big project and it will take you 3 years, it really doesn't mind to go on a higher level first and see what will be the end goal. Prototyping is something that is loved in the Dynamics NAV world, where you start with the user creating a change request and a quick spec, and then with the flexibility of Dynamics NAV, you start prototyping. And you can do prototyping in your office and then send some FOB files or screenshot, but you can also sit together with people and start building the prototype, and then you have workshops and training. And then when everyone agrees, well, this is what we want, then a very good thing to do is to get back, write the full specification, fine-tune the software, do another workshop and testing, document and training. What often fails is that they go into a straight line from workshops and testing to go live. So prototyping and workshops is great, but when you agree to say, well, this is what we want, go back to the drawing board and say, well, is this all what we first agreed? Finish the software and then document and go into production. To compare these two, the waterfall approach has a very thorough analysis phase. And if done correctly, your original specification is very close to the documentation. The tendency of changing the specifications while doing development is not a common approach in waterfall. It requires a very, very high level of analysis resources. You cannot just send a junior consultant or a junior manager to do the specification. It really needs to be done by someone who knows the functional requirements, but also knows technical requirements and possibilities. And there's a high possibility of that this is not what I meant effect. Even if you write a spec and you send it to your customer, there's a big chance that he says, well, I don't really understand it, but I don't want to think that I'm stupid, so I'm going to say, well, I trust you because you're smart, and then do it. And then they come back with something that was not wanted. The good thing about waterfall approach is that if everything is spec'd and everything is written down, you can just get in a bus of junior developers and let them work on the specs until it's finished. The good thing about prototyping compared to waterfall is that there's much quicker visual results. You build a table, build a form, run the form, say, well, is this what you want? Oh yeah, that is what I want, and I can start populating it and then fine-tune it. And it requires lesser skilled analysis resources. And there's a closer connection to the end result. But because you immediately start developing, there is a chance that in the end, things like documentation just never happens, because why would we do it? Software is finished, and I work in a small company. I can explain my 3 colleagues, and then everything is good, right? And there's a high chance of never-ending development, and we forgot things. What I like personally myself, but it really should match the project. It's agile software development, which is comparable to prototyping, where you do workshops. But there's a really high interaction between functional and technical teams, and even in those situations, the people who work on it are both functional and technical. There's a lot of face-to-face and on-site stuff, and the developments are generally very senior and experienced. You can work with constantly changing requirements, and it's chaotic. It's more challenging to do, but fun, but difficult to manage. So let's look at something which is somewhere in the middle. There's a lot of talk about doing Scrum, and I really urge you to investigate this methodology, because in my opinion it's a really good combination of all the other methodologies we discussed. But again, not every project requires the same methodology. So don't make it mandatory in your organization. Make people think about what they can do. Never switch methodologies in between. I mean, don't start speccing on waterfall and then start changing it. And use resources that match the methodology. Don't do agile development with junior developers, and don't have junior consultants write waterfall specs. Tasks. Within a project of changing Dynamics NAV, we can set up one or more tasks, and the tasks are basically the things that we want to do in the system. And a task can be write a report that does this and this, or write an interface that does this and this. And the detail of the tasks really depend on the software development methodology. Tasks may be nested and linked, and you might not be able to start on one task before something else is completed. But task can lead to both development, but also system setup. If you have a project and you break your project down in tasks, one of the tasks may be to do system setup, but very often tasks lead to changing the objects in Dynamics NAV. So that brings us to the next thing on the agenda, which is, once I have set up the project and the tasks, the next challenge is to manage the objects and the versions. Objects in Dynamics NAV are the core of the application, and managing the objects and what happens to the objects and which object is where is a cornerstone of a project success. There's a lot of things, but managing the objects is something which is a big challenge. But as we all know, we have this lovely object designer, and it allows me to change the entire application, but I never get deltas, and I only have this weird modified flag and a version list that only contains 100 characters or 80 or something like that. Well, the good news is there are many ways to do version management in Dynamics NAV, and As a matter of fact, we saw a couple of ways to manage objects during this event, also yesterday in the session of Lars. But of course, they have this edge from us to be able to change the base application, something that we cannot do. But before we start discussing object management, I think it's very important to explain the difference between source control and version management. And in my opinion, these two things get mixed up pretty frequently. If you look at source control, basically what you want with source control is you design an object, you make some changes, and you want to have the previous copy of the object somewhere, or you want to store the deltas or something else. You want to see who has modified the object and what and when. And basically it refers to something which is called object check-in and check-out, preventing others from working at the same object. Well, version management, that's more where the tasks and the project get in, where why has an object been changed and what other object has been changed for that same task. And what objects should I release and export when I want to have this functionality available in another database. And if I export the objects to another database, do these objects have overlap with other tasks that are maybe not finished and that I need to finish or maybe separate before I can put the objects from one database to another. And if you put this in a data model, you can see that you have the change request in the middle, which is basically the task. The task leads to a object change, and the object change is linked to an object. And whenever you are done with the change request, one or more change requests gets combined in something which is then called a release. And the release in the end then can contain multiple released objects. And one object in a release can maybe be changed for 2 or more tasks. And then you can generate the task, combine the objects, and then move them from one database to another, preferably from production to test, and from development to test and then production. So how do I track changes? There are ways of tracking changes in Dynamics NAV. In fact, there are at this moment 4, and Microsoft will allow us to do a 5th way in version 7. The oldest and most classic way to track changes in the database is by manual tracking. This is something that I did when we had a native database without the possibility of do SQL triggers. Basically what I did is I have an object table mirror, a single instance code unit with a timer which is constantly pinging to catch the changes. So whenever there is something in the object table which has a mismatch in my copy table, then I know that an object has changed. But there might be multiple developers working on the same database, so multi-user is a big issue in that case. Then there is something which is basically out of my scope, but I know that some partners use it, which is called a rolling object table, which is a backdoor into Dynamics NAV for .NET developers. And if you're really good in doing things in .NET, you can catch changes and do your complete object management outside of Dynamics NAV. There's some links about with blogs where you can find information about that to do it yourself. Rolling object table, for some reason, didn't work in early builds of version 7. And they started to discuss it with Microsoft, and for what I know is that it will be working in future versions of Dynamics NAV as well. But it's a backdoor and it's not officially supported. And I think one of the most common ways in current development to do object tracking is to use SQL Server. You would still need a table mirror from the object, but by using a trigger in SQL Server, you can be able to catch every change, but also catch the user who does the change. And if you set up the SQL trigger correctly, you can force people to use the tool. So it's not possible anymore to make a change without doing something with the tool. So you always know who has changed an object and when. And you can even block multi-user development access by combining this also with the object locking we had introduced in Dynamics NAV 2009 R2, which we will be discussing during this presentation as well. In Dynamics NAV 2009 R2, we got another possibility of doing object changes, which is the database triggers. For the CRM integration, to the integration with between Dynamics NAV and Dynamics CRM, they have implemented some new triggers, which can be found in Code Unit 1. And basically what it does is every time something happens with the table, every time guaranteed this trigger will fire. So what you can do is add code or maybe change the code to be able to catch object table changes to do your object tracking. Of course, all of the rest of the requirements will be the same. You would still need a table to store who has changed what. But it's a different approach compared to the SQL Server triggers. Of course, the downside is that it's a change in Code Unit 1. The change will be everywhere. You need to have a changed object, and if someone can go into Code Unit 1 and just switch it off, well, SQL Trigger is more forcing and outside of the database to do object tracking. So I want to do a small demo to show how you can do this. I got the inspiration from Jörg Strick, who has downloaded or uploaded the SQL trigger to his blog, and I made some changes to it in order for it to work with my requirements. So if I go into Dynamics NAV, I can see that I have a form open where I need to define some tasks. And if I look at the tasks, I see that I have an active task. And the task basically says I have changed some objects. Let's deactivate this task and go into the object designer. Let's go to form, company information, and design. We go into make a change and say, well, we want to save this change. Basically what happens is I get this very ugly error, which can probably be replaced by a much nicer error. But it's basically saying that there's an error accessing a SQL Server table, and it says I cannot link the change in my current object to an active task in the database. So why is that? The reason for this is that if you go to SQL Server, this is my database. If I go to my tables, I have put a filter on the tables. So I only want tables that have the name object in it. And then I have the object table. And one of the features in SQL Server that we maybe still remember from the old time when we had SIFT triggers, which are replaced by SIFT views, is that I have created a trigger called object auditing. And basically what this trigger does is every time something happens in the object table, this trigger fires. And in a SQL Server trigger, you have standard parameters like we have in a form. We have rec and xrec. In the SQL Server trigger, you also have these standard variables that you can use. So you can say, well, is something inserted, is something deleted? And basically what it does is it inserts a record into a table, which is a normal Dynamics NAV table, basically saying, well, make a copy of the change in the object table, but add the username, add the host name, add the date, the timestamp, and say that it was either replaced or inserted, and join that with the object. And basically, because there is no active task, it says find an active task within the database. It just throws an error if I am not allowed or I don't have an active task. The table which is stored, used for storing the change, is basically a normal Dynamics NAV table, which is called the development task object. And basically this table just contains a unique ID, which is auto increment field. And basically it just, every time I change an object, it will contain a record. And I have created this UI that basically concatenates this, and you can see how many changes there were made. So let's see what happens if I create a new task and start making a change. Go to the same form, go to design, make a change. If I now save the object, everything still works, not everyone happy. I'll save it again. And if I now go back to my task, I can go and see that I have changed company information. I have saved it twice. And basically this allows me to basically track object changes and combine it to a task. The task is then linked to the project. And every time I work on the task, we can see what object changes are made. Of course, this to use this, it is required to have your development database on a SQL server. But telling that 5 years ago was maybe a challenge. But these days, I think everyone has their development databases running on a SQL box and not anymore on a native, or at least I hope. One of the things that can help us in this context of managing our objects is a new functionality which is introduced in R2, which is called object locking. And basically all it is if you go to the object designer, there's this 2 new fields basically saying, well, this object is locked and is locked by someone. And if I lock an object, no one else is supposed to change that object. You can do object locking manually or automatic. I can go and say lock an object, and I can see, well, I have locked it now, and it's locked by me. And if now someone else will open this database and try to design this table, then it will be then they will get an error saying, well, this object is being changed by someone else, and please contact him, or have this really nice feature that's saying force unlock. So if he's on vacation, you can still work on the objects. So that's manual object locking. Another option is to have it automatically lock objects when you design. This is kind of a hidden feature, which is in a table which is not really subject to change in many installations. But in the options of the client, there is this auto lock on design, which you can put to yes. And if you start the client again, my license is expired. Hip hip hooray. And now, when I go into another object, it doesn't work. That's always the hurrah moment. Okay, you get a t-shirt. So now it's still active. Thank you. So I go into design, and the object is locked. Or this one was locked, right? Okay, this one is locked now. Okay, so this one is now automatically locked. There's only one downside to this option, and that every object you look at is locked. So if I'm wondering, well, what is this thing doing? Then immediately, even if I don't change something, it is locked. And even if you like, for example, go to code unit 80, go to design, this one is locked. But if you use this cool new feature saying go to definition to have a look at what it's doing, even then this table is locked. Well, of course, there is the same workaround in here using SQL Server triggers, that if you want to have manual lock and you say, well, for my organization, I don't want to lock on open, but I want to lock it on save, you can basically set the locked on via a SQL Server trigger. So now I have changed the objects. I know perfectly which objects are changed, and now I want to test my solution. In the old days, we would call the consultant because we don't know how the application works, or we call the end user because he knows his application, and we say, well, this is the objects, and go testing, and call me next week, and then it's either good or bad. But we also get this cool new automated testing framework. Who has seen the testing framework or has played with it during the conference? Okay, some hands not. So Microsoft has given us this new testing tool. I have implemented it in this database. And basically, the testing framework is a way of testing your application through CAL code. So you can write scripts in CAL, and there's a couple of new properties that were introduced that, for example, handle errors and handle UI. But one of the cool things about this test tool is that the test tool knows what objects it's going to test. A test tool knows that, well, this test is going to encode unit 90, and this test will touch table 1 or table 18. So if you combine that knowledge and say, this is my task model with my change objects, and this is my testing model where I know what tests are going to test what object, you can combine them and say, well, if I change this object, I need to run these test features. And that gives you, as a developer, a chance to very easy start some testing while doing development. Another thing that is a challenge if you do development is that maybe your change requires a new setup or change setup, or maybe even a data conversion. Maybe you have added a new field, or you've added a new table, and you want historical data to make use of your new functionality, so you need to start some data conversion. My advice, and I made the mistake I think a few months ago, is always create either a CAL object or a SQL script to do that update. Because otherwise you will do the update generally on a Sunday afternoon or a Saturday evening, and you do everything like you test it, but then something is forgotten in the data conversion, and even though the software is bug-free and everything is being tested, because of the data conversion, something went wrong. The software just doesn't work. And the good thing about doing your conversion in a CAL object is that that CAL object then also gets attached to the task, and you can export it together with the task as a version to the production database. And after a week or after a month, you can just say, okay, I will remove the object because the data conversion is done and I don't need it anymore. Or if you're an ISV, you will have to run it 5,000 times at every customer. So now we have developed, we know which tasks we have finished, we know the objects that are changed, and I want to start putting my objects into a production database. Basically, if you do this manually, you go to the object designer, you check all the modified flags, you unlock the objects. Yeah, maybe for being safe, you compile it, and then you make a FOB, and you end up with all these modified flags in a production database, and you don't know what happened. So the solution for that is versioning, issuing a versioning number, and maybe include your setup project, and I will get to that later, maybe analyze permission impact. So let's look at releasing the objects. When I go to my database, I have this list of tasks. I have done this task and this task and this task, and I want to release whatever is in there to the production database. Of course, before I do that, I need to make sure that no one is still developing in the database. So I turn off all of the active tasks, so everyone who is still developing will get the runtime error when saving. And I have here an object which says release. And basically what it says is I'm going to release the data, and I'm going to issue a version number. And by connecting a version to a bunch of tasks, basically it allows me to say, well, these 3 tasks will get shipped together to the production database, and by issuing a version number, I know when it happened, and I have the data in my database, so if something happens in the future, I can go back into this data and I can start analyzing it. And really what this does is it avoids having the need to have all these changes in the version list. Sometimes if you look at databases, you have this spec 1, spec 10, and all of the specifications where you change this object for are in the version list. And even sometimes I have seen version continues in doc trigger. And then in the doc trigger, it's really ugly. So we don't want that. We just want clean versioning numbers, and we want the versioning number to be as short as possible. So my advice is to really don't reinvent the wheel. Look at the versioning numbers that Dynamics NAV is using. And I always prefer to have like 1 or 2 versioning numbers. So this is, in this example, it's 1.010004, but you can also have 1 level or 2 levels. It's basically your own decision. And basically, if I now say, well, create this release, basically there's a super simple script saying, okay, well, I have these objects, and these objects are changed with the tasks. And basically all it does is I can go back to my release, copy the version number to my clipboard, and basically filter on the version list. And then it will say, well, this is the objects that are in my release. And the modified flag is clean. So whenever I start doing new development, the modified flag is turned off. And I know exactly which objects to export. And I say export, and I say, well, this is this release. And there it's done. So it's not rocket science, but by having the results of knowing what objects are changed for what reason, I can easily do this. And it's just simple CAL code. Okay, so permission impact. Even if you test everything, and even if your software is completely bug-free, how many of you had these Monday morning experiences where they still call and say, I cannot enter this new table? Oh, I was afraid that I was the only one, but fortunately it's not. So if you create new tables, you would also need to set up permissions, unless everyone is super. So if we complete the picture of the data model that we need as a minimum for this versioning and testing, we can also say, well, we know what objects are touched. We know what we tested. The test is probably connected to some functional process. So if the test says this is a purchasing test, then I know that maybe the purchasers in my company need to have these extra permissions. So basically, this allows you to update the permissions in your system and don't have this early morning calls on Monday after the update. If you went to the session that Lars Hammer did, you have seen that Microsoft is internally working on this tool, which is called DevBase. And DevBase is another methodology tool that allows us to analyze what we did, and it has this great new feature of making a package and making a modification with Delta. And imagine having this tool and combining it with version management like this, and it would really give you a really extremely powerful way of managing your objects, seeing how many times it has been changed, etc. So to go down to a list of tools you can download, there's a lot of free downloadable tools on Mebuso. This is just a list, but there's plenty more. Then some partners have decided to make this a commercial activity. So there seems to be a real need to do this. Both of these partners are exhibiting here, so you can visit them and look at their tools, but they're not free, but it'll save you money. So I think we're running nicely on time, so we have half an hour left for some real-life tips and Q&A. So one of the struggles that people are facing is what database am I in? And we used to have this form, which was a menu in 3.7 and 2.6 and whatever comes before that. But if you're in the classic client, it's difficult to know which database you are in. And if you go to the blogs, you can see that there are solutions for it. This is a solution that I downloaded from Waldo's blog, and basically what it does is when Microsoft removed or moved from the menu forms to the menu suite, they deleted the forms, of course, from 330 and all the other menus, but there used to be this trigger which started the menus, and also the trigger that started the menus disappeared. But if you go into this magic code unit 1, and you create a new function, and it doesn't really matter the name of the function, so it's not looking at the name. But if you go to the properties of that function and don't say Alt F1, it will close your nav. So this function has ID 1, and each time you press this button, which is also still here from the old days for backwards compatibility, every time you hit that or you hit F12, in code unit 1, the function with ID 1 is executed, no matter what is in there. So you can run a form, but you also can do business logic or whatever you want. So basically, by just putting in back this trigger, you can do it. Let me start this now. Of course, when we had the role-tailored client, we had the same requirement. Also, unfortunately, the role-tailored client, when they released it, didn't show. There didn't have the possibility to show in what database you are in. So for that purpose, I made a very small page that you can download from Ibiso and put into your role center. But then we had this opportunity to go to Denmark and discussed it with them, and they said, well, is this really that important? And then all the hands raised, and okay, we're going to do something for it. So that happened, and I need to... For some reason it doesn't start. There's no network available. I need some network. So yes, I need some network. So I will show the setup is being done in the company information. This is not an R2 database, I think. So there's this new thing called system indicator, and it says, well, what do you want to show in the role-tailored client? And I say, well, I want to show custom text, but I can also say, well, I want to show the company information or the database name and a company name. I can even have a style, and this one even has more styles than a normal field property has. So I have 9 or 10 styles. And now let me try to start the role-tailored client again, because I should have network. While this is starting up, this company indicator also works through Code Unit 1. So if you go to Code Unit 1, there's also a new function called get system indicator. And basically all it does is it gets the company information and it returns the system indicator. This is only executed once when the client is start up. Even if you switch companies, I don't think it's refreshed. So I wanted to start using it for messaging with end users, but it didn't work. So it only allows the value to be in, and it doesn't reread the information. The role-tailored client doesn't seem to want to start up. But while this is thinking, this is going to be the end result if the role-tailored client starts up. Basically, every page that you open, if it's whether it's the role center, an embedded page, or a new page, it will say this text in the color of the decision you have made on the company setup. Yeah, something. It must be something like that. So, Hungarian notation. I wrote a blog about it. We also discussed it in the previous session with Partner Ready Software. For me, the most important reason not to use Hungarian notation is not the fact that I don't like Hungarian notation, but we are in an ecosystem where we read and use and change each other's code. And if everyone writes code differently, it's really difficult to use code from each other. If NAV would have Hungarian notation, then the recommendation would be to use it as well, because then you would use the same. But apart from that, it doesn't seem to improve readability. Okay. Another thing which is a general requirement if you want to change your task is that the development database is not up to date. And you don't want to create a new development database every day or every week. So instead of doing that, we have thought of something which is called the yesterday database. And the yesterday database, it can also be a weekly or a monthly database. But if you run on SQL Server, it's very easy to set up a script which every night copies your database and makes a backup of your database and restore it as another name. You can basically just go into SQL Server, to the Management Studio. This is Outlook. This is Management Studio. Go away. I say task, backup, and do all the things you need to back up and say, okay, I want to script this to a job and do the restore, script it as a job, schedule the job, and basically what you will end up with is every day a new database which is a copy of the production system. And there are many, many benefits to having that. You can test hotfixes, but you can also, if a user comes with a weird error, usually the data is also in the yesterday database if you're lucky, but if you have EDI, you can just import all the EDI files of today and then you'll maybe have the same error. You can do debugging without blocking, you can do troubleshooting, but another thing you can use it for is, for example, for reporting. If you have big, massive reports, you can just have a copy of your live database and do your analysis by dimensions or stuff like that in that database. Debugging. For some reason, debugging is still a challenge for some people. I very often see people just start the debugging with the triggers and everything activated and then F5ing through everything. So the current debugger has these two great things that you can actually use breakpoints. And it might sound silly, but for some reason, I just see people not using it. So basically, you can say, I'm just setting a breakpoint, and whenever I start the debugger, it'll break on this point. But the debugger has this other great thing, and that is this option of stop debugging. And I think this was an option which is introduced with the new debugger we got a couple of versions ago, where you can go into a transaction and say, well, this is wrong, and say stop debugging, and then the document will still be there. Because what often is very difficult is that you have this test scenario and you want to try to solve it, but to get to the test scenario is a long way. You need to create a sales document, you need to purchase something and ship it to the warehouse, and then finally you get this test scenario, but you don't want to destroy your test scenario by posting the document. So basically, the option of stop debugging allows you to say, well, I know where the error is, and I want to stop debugging. So basically, I am now at my at the breakpoint that I set. set in the code unit, and I can see, well, this is wrong. I know what I want to change, and I can just say stop debugging, and the entire transaction will be rolled back, and the document is still there. And this is something that is not commonly known. More people are knowing it, but I just seen too many times that there are people who don't use this option. Use built-in toolboxes. Don't reinvent the wheel. There's this great feature which is called the Excel buffer table, where you can just populate a temporary table and then have the contents exported to Excel. So you don't need to mess around with COM or .NET. And there's many more of those built-in toolboxes. A very common example is formatting of addresses. If your end user or consultant starts making reports, tell them that there is a way to concatenate the address to a nicely formatted way, and that it's only there's a standard way of formatting that. Number series. Unfortunately, there are still a lot of installations where people set up a new table, and that's the numbers is not created through a number series. Actually, I did it myself with my development tool, but that's just not to have overlap with the standard application. And there's stuff like mail, SMTP mail, interface with Exchange. So remember to use that whenever there's a requirement for that. And then I really, a lot of times you see this form.run and then 1 instead of form company 1. And basically the reason for that is that, it's just a hassle of finding the form name and typing it and blah, blah, blah. But if you use the compiler is easily fooled. So if I go and create a new code unit, and I say form.run and then form 1, I know it's slightly more typing than just 1, but it's not that much. When I now design it, it says company information. So it's a very simple thing. It has been in there for would like to say decades, ages, and it basically allows you to have a nice name without going to the hassle of finding the object name. The same is with option fields. If you want to have readable code, it really is advisable to use the names of the options. And if you don't know the names, just type in 2, and once the compiler has done its job and you reopen the object, it'll say item. The same is with field names. If you know exactly what field names you have, you can even type in cust.field1, and it will compile into the field number. So I go to record 18, cust, and I say I can compile the object, and when I reopen it, it will say number field. A lot of field numbers are the same in NAV, so if you're working with the product for a few years, you probably end up knowing all the field numbers by heart. So, or at least I do. You can play field number bingo if you want. This is the last slide. I think we're running quite good on time. Reports. A lot of customers have a bunch of reports, 100, 200, 300, and reports are not that expensive, but every time you run out of the numbers, you need to buy other numbers. And another requirement is that if you're upgrading the database, or if you are saying, okay, I want reports to be going to RDLC, I want to know which reports are actually used, and if someone comes to me with a report, I want to know what report it is. So basically, I have a couple of advices. And the first one is always print the report ID on a report. You might argue about an invoice or a shipping document, but even then, a number, small, packed somewhere, no one will ever ask. And the benefit of having that is that if an end user comes to you with a report, even if you haven't made a report, you haven't looked at it before, you don't have to say, well, in what option did you activate the report, and then start the debugger and then see, oh, this is the report number. If you print the report ID on every report, you will make life so much easier for people in the future. And then there's this question about, is this report used or not? When have you executed the report line? Oh no, this is my most important report. Well, you only execute it once a year. There was one way, there are two ways. I have made a solution myself to save report usage, but in 2009, you can download a hotfix, and the hotfix will enable you to start report counting. And basically, the two solutions are quite the same. I will start with explaining how the Microsoft official solution works. And the reason that they got this in was basically to allow you to start this at customers, so when you start upgrading, you know exactly which report is important and which report is not important. So you don't spend time on converting reports to RDLC while they are never used. So basically the solution, I think I have set it up in the other database. Go back. To implement this solution, you need to make a table yourself. So it's going to cost you a table. There's no way to get around that. I was hoping that they're going to make this 2 million table, but it's not free. So I have a simple table which says report usage, and I have implemented this this morning. So I tested it and I created 2 reports. And basically, this is 3 fields. It's user ID, report ID, and date time. And the key of the table is just all 3 fields. So with the date time, it's a pretty good chance that it's a unique record. So how does this table get populated? Again, the magical code unit 1 will allow us to do it. Just like with the function with the ID number 1 to start a form, there is a new function which has a number which is hard-coded, I think somewhere in Fin SQL or whatever. If you go to globals functions and then get the properties, this function has ID number 120. And if your function in code unit 1 has ID 120, it will start whenever a report is run. So basically, this allows me to say, well, it has a parameter. The parameter is also fixed. It's just an integer. And it comes in with an integer report ID. I know the user ID. I know the current and date time. So I can insert a log entry. And if I run report 1, even if I do preview, I will get a record in the table. So I have run report 1 again. But the good thing about this solution, and the solution that I put on my blog doesn't do it, is that this one also saves the data for processing only reports. So even if I do a processing only report, it will save the report users, even though it doesn't really match the requirement of doing it for upgrades in RDLC. You will still know how many times they have run this specific object. So if you are not on the NAV 2009 R2 executables and you are not able to download the hotfix, then there is another way of doing this. There is another system function in code unit 1, but this only works with reports that are actually printed. If you have a report that goes to a printer, it will always go through this function. to find the printer. Unfortunately, you cannot start a transaction in this function. So if I copy this code and go to this printer function and say this will not work. This will say you cannot start a transaction in this trigger. So what is the workaround? The workaround that I have implemented is you create a single instance code unit. And the single instance code unit has a global variable of the same type of the report log. And you call the single instance code unit and you populate the temporary table. Because it's a temporary table, it will allow you to save the data. It will not give you the error message saying, well, this is not a good place to do it. And then you have these closing triggers that if you close the company, then some things can happen. And here you can write to the database. So you can have another call to your single instance code unit saying, clear the buffer, write it to the actual data, and basically it's the same result, only in this you need an extra single instance code unit. So you need one extra object, and it doesn't work for non-printing reports. This was the content I wanted to share with you. I hope it was what you came for. And we have like 10 minutes left for Q&A. I have 3 t-shirts left. So are there any questions? Everyone wants to go home? Someone wants a t-shirt and has a question? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I don't really have a question. Sorry.
Oh. But you wanted a t-shirt?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I see a hand over there.
For the Microsoft hotfix solution, can you write anything into that table that you create? So you can almost write which users also running which reports? Or
Yeah. I haven't tested. I just implemented the example, which was on the Dynamics NAV team blog. But yes, it is a trigger that you can write whatever from, so you can be creative. Yes.
Okay.
You said using the word automation on the sheet where you mentioned the Excel buffer.
Yes.
Do you mean the word automation, just the DLL?
No, I just tried to come up with some examples for the slide, and I know that there is an example of word automation for CRM. So if you have a segment or an interaction, you can do a Word document. So basically, that's what I meant with the Word solution.
My question, because I heard yesterday, I believe, that automations are phased out.
Yes.
So
Microsoft will have to re-engineer that to .NET Interop.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm using that very often because we create Word documents.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, I was in doubt whether you advise to reuse the automations.
Yeah, but like we said in the partner-ready software presentation, that if you have a DLL that interfaces with something, it's always a best practice to write a wrapper around it, so that whenever the DLL gets changed by a new version or by a new technology, you only need to change the wrapper, and all of the other software doesn't break.
Yeah, that was a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Hi. My question's about being able to track obsolete objects, not just reports.
What do you mean with
To also track use.
you want to obsolete forms as well, or
Yeah, so
obsolete
we
code
could
units?
find objects that are being used and be able to tell which are not being used.
The solution that I've used a couple of times, but it's uglier. You need to be on site or have a good DBA guy. But if you are strongly convinced that a code unit is no longer used, you can remove it from permissions. It's very easy to set it up again if it is used. So that's one of the back doors if you want to implement that. But otherwise, I wouldn't know of any other solution. I think there was a hand over there.
Have you ever used code coverage log to track the object running? No, it's the question was I used to track any objects run by users when objects when Navision starts. We can start the code coverage log. So in this case, we can track any objects and not only reports. So it's. No, it's not a question. It's just.
No, I understand what you mean. You have the possibility to start code coverage from NAV by CL code. So that is another workaround to track whatever is used.
Yes, and when we company close, we can write to the table all information from
but it will generate a lot of data.
So we can filter it only for the forms around and everything. Thank you.
Okay. You get the last T-shirt for that.
Can I ask about debugger? When you press F9, you set breakpoints, yes? It's a red circle. When you press F9 on the same place twice,
it's again
white.
White.
What is the purpose?
What does it do? Yeah. Lars, are you still here? So do you know what it does? Yeah, but it's just... Okay, so the answer that Lars gave, if I interpret it correctly, this also deletes the breakpoints, but you can have a remembrance that it was once there. So that is the answer from Microsoft for you. And I have something to blog about. Any more questions? Okay, well, there's a hand over there.
Wait.
Yeah. The suggestion is you cannot write to the database from this trigger. Can't you use ADO or some other technology? Yes, sure. That's another workaround. There's so many workarounds.